Over the last few sections, you learned all about objects and prototypical inheritance in JavaScript. Now in ES6 or ES 2015, which is like the modern version of JavaScript, there is a new way to create objects and implement inheritance. That's using classes. But these classes are not like classes that we have in languages like C# and Java. They're essentially syntactic sugar over prototypical inheritance. That's why I wanted to make sure that you fully understand how prototypical inheritance works before we look at the new syntax, which is cleaner and simpler. So here we have this constructor function that you have seen throughout the course. We have this radius property as well as the draw method. Now let's see how we can rewrite this code using ES6 classes. So for now, I'm going to comment out this code so we create a class with the same name. We start with the class keyword, add the name of the class, and then curly braces. This is what we call the body of this class. In this body, we can define properties and methods. One special method that we have, it's called constructor, and we use that to initialize objects, just like this constructor function that we have here. So in this method, we pass the radius parameter and set the radius property on the new object instance that is created. So that's our radius property. Now, if you want to define a method, we won't use this syntax. That's not how we do it. Instead, we define methods in the body of this class. So here we add the draw method like this. So note that we don't have the function keyword here. We just add the name of the method and parentheses and then curly braces. So this syntax is more familiar to people who come from languages like C# and Java. But as I told you before, these classes are just syntactic sugar over constructor functions. And you're going to see that in a second. So in this method, let's do a console.log. Now we can create circle objects just like before. So const C, we set this to a new circle. Of course, here we need to pass the radius. Done. Now here in the console, let's inspect C. So we have a circle object with the radius property. In its prototype, we have the draw method. So all the methods that we add here will end up on the prototype of the circle object. Now, if you don't want a method to end up on the prototype, then you need to define it in the constructor, just like before. So here I'm going to define a move method. Save the changes. Now let's inspect C. So here we have the move method on the object instance and the draw method on the prototype. So that's our circle object. Now let's look at the type of circle class. That's a function. So that's why I said these classes are essentially functions. They're constructor functions. Don't believe me? Let me show you. So if you head over to babel.js.io, you can see Babel. Babel is a JavaScript compiler. We give it our modern JavaScript code, and it compiles it down to ES5 code that all browsers understand. So you can type some modern JavaScript code here, and then see the result of compilation in ES5 below. So let's just define a circle class here, add a constructor that takes a radius and sets this.radius to this radius argument. Okay. Now, here is the result of compilation. So we have this circle constructor function. Look, it's a function that takes radius. Now, don't worry about what we have on the first line. I'm going to get to that in a second. But if you scroll down, you can see this.radius is set to radius. That's exactly like what we had in our constructor functions. Now, what is this first line here? Well, here we have a function called class callCheck. And the job of this function is to make sure that you have used the new operator. If you don't, it's going to yell at you. Let me show you. So back to our code here. If I forget to use the new operator, look, we get this error. Class constructor circle cannot be invoked without new. So earlier in the course where I talked about factory and constructor functions, I told you that one of the arguments that people make against constructor functions is that the developer has to remember to use the new operator. Now, personally, I don't really like this argument. It's very childish. If a programmer forgets to use the new operator, what kind of programmer are they? But anyway, let's just stick to that. Classes in ES6 enforce the use of the new operator. So that argument about the new operator, in my opinion, is no longer valid. Now, later in this section, when we get to inheritance, you will see that classes provide a cleaner syntax to implement inheritance than what you learned in the last section about prototypical inheritance. So that's the basic of classes. Over the next few lectures, we're going to look at classes in more detail.